Many of the problems between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law arise from the mother-in-law being strict with the daughter-in-law. However, there are also combinations of kind mothers-in-law and strict daughters-in-law. I am Michelle. Recently, I've been concerned about my dry skin and have been struggling to choose the right cosmetics. I'm an ordinary housewife in my 40s. My husband, Ryan, and I have been married long enough to celebrate our 15th anniversary, which is the crystal wedding anniversary. Although we have our little misunderstandings, we maintain a peaceful relationship without any major conflicts. Our daughter, Aileen, turned 7th grade this fall and is enthusiastic about her club activities. She can be rough in her language and tends to shut herself in her room during her rebellious phase, but I know at her core, she is a kind and considerate child, so Ryan and I quietly watch over her. Our son, Harry, is a 9-year-old who loves playing games. He was often sick from being born till he was in kindergarten, but he's a healthy child who goes to school in short sleeves even in winter. In such an ordinary family, I was living a reasonably happy life. However, since the kids became less demanding, I increased my part-time work, which drained more energy than I expected, leading to a lot of quick and easy meals which became a worry for me. That's about the extent of my worries. My parents live far away, but Ryan's family is only about a 20-minute drive away. Because of this, after having children, we often relied on my in-laws for support. My father-in-law had a personality like an old-fashioned stubborn man, but he was very indulgent with his grandchildren and always prepared plenty of snacks for them when they visited. June, my mother-in-law, who had been living closely with my father-in-law, is a warm, yet meticulous person who always moved around busily with a smile while taking care of household chores. For this reason, I felt no reluctance in visiting my in-laws and was genuinely appreciative of their warm embrace of my children. This lifestyle continued until my father-in-law passed away 3 years ago. Following a 2-year struggle with illness, his funeral was marked by a somber yet peaceful atmosphere. Still, June and Ryan were feeling down, so I did what I could to support them. Who would take care of June now that she was alone? Keith volunteered. Keith is the brother of Ryan, and he's got a wife named Sharon. As a condition, Keith wanted to inherit the family home. Sharon was passionate about education and seemed to want to live in the family home, conveniently located near a station, to enroll their only daughter, Miley, who was then 10 years old, in a private school. June is a kind individual, but I was genuinely concerned that cohabiting with someone as a daughter-in-law might result in stress. Since the discussions had already progressed between Ryan and Keith, I felt I couldn't say anything. Keith's family and June began living in the family home shortly after. My prediction came true. 3 years later, the relationship between June and Sharon had considerably deteriorated.
June, I brought some apples that my family sent over to me.
Oh dear, I appreciate it.
When I visited June one deep autumn day, I handed her a paper bag with apples at the entrance. She peered into the bag with a smile.
Oh, they smell fresh and delightful. I look forward to this every year. I need to call your mother and thank her.
You are welcome. My mom also seems to love the mandarins you send.
To hear you say that makes it worthwhile for me to send them.
She placed her hand at her mouth and offered a delicate, elegant smile. I can't manage such a refined way of laughing. I have a habit of laughing loudly with a big mouth and clapping my hands, so I admire June's gestures. As the children grew up, I've been busy with my part-time job and household chores, and it had been a while since I last saw June. I wanted to share more about the children's growth and recent happenings. However, there was someone who interrupted my thoughts.
Hey June, it's noisy talking at the entrance and it's bothering the neighbors. Could you stop? Michelle, You should leave quickly once you're done.
Sharon.
It was Sharon, my sister-in-law. She stuck her head out from the living room, frowning and showing no effort to hide her displeasure.
Okay, I'm sorry. Michelle, I'll enjoy the apples.
Oh, right.
June replied softly, appearing apologetic as she closed the door. I could only watch the closing door, holding back what I wanted to say.
Sharon is still cold to June, as usual. It hurts to watch.
Is that so?
That night, I vented to Ryan about what had happened at June's house when he returned home. He sighed deeply, looking troubled. This was not uncommon. For the first 6 months after moving in together, Sharon seemed to be holding back, and there were no conflicts between June and her. However, last year, when Keith's daughter, Miley, entered 6th grade and started serious study for the prestigious private school, the tension towards June began to increase. It seemed that Miley was also taking out her stress on her grandmother, June. While all this was happening, Keith appeared to be turning a blind eye, repeatedly working late and going in on weekends. However, this fall, Miley successfully entered her first-choice school, and I thought Sharon's irritation might settle down. Perhaps she no longer needed to accompany Miley to cram school, spent more time at home, and appeared to regard June as an even greater inconvenience.
June can be a bit meddlesome, so living together might have challenges. But the way she's treated is just too much.
Yeah.
When the topic of his family came up, Ryan's already limited words dwindled even further. Even though Keith and Sharon received significant benefits, it must have been hard for Ryan to speak poorly of them since he depended on them for his mom's care. I worried about June, but I knew that if we intervened, it might worsen her situation. After talking about his family, we would always end up sighing heavily. However, the situation took a sudden turn. Well, perhaps it was as planned for Keith and Sharon. Keith came to our house one weekend, unusually saying he had a consultation. I felt a bit uneasy, but I sent the kids to their room and guided him to the living room. I thought it would be easier for them to talk if I wasn't there, but Keith stopped me, so I ended up sitting in on the conversation. With a noticeably dark expression, Keith opened his mouth heavily.
You're aware that Sharon and Mom don't get along, right?
Well, yes.
Ryan and I gave vague answers. It felt a bit off to say they didn't get along. It seemed more like Sharon was treating June poorly and one-sidedly. Unaware of our reactions, Keith nodded dramatically, looking satisfied.
Because of that, she is under a lot of stress and it's a problem.
Oh. I see.
I think June looks much worse than Sharon.
I'm Sharon's husband, so I want to prioritize her.
Oh, that's admirable. Protecting his wife. What a reflection of a good husband. Yet, it seems he's been avoiding responsibility until now.
So, we've decided to have Mom move out.
What?
Ryan and I instinctively shouted in unison at the absurdity of Keith's statement. He wanted to kick June out, but shouldn't they be the ones packing up instead? No way, no way, no way.
Why should it be Mom who has to leave?
Even Ryan, normally calm, raised his voice in disbelief. Despite being slightly pressured by Ryan's anger, Keith continued his selfish claims.
It can't be helped. Sharon keeps crying and saying that she can't live with my mother anymore.
In that case, why can't you two just leave?
That's impossible. Do you have any idea how much Miley's tuition costs? Private school is ridiculously expensive.
It's common knowledge that private school costs money. Didn't you plan for that when you decided?
Well, Sharon said that if she doesn't go to a private school, she won't get into a good university.
That's all based on your whims. There's no reason for Mom to be the one who has to move out.
What a couple lacking in foresight they are. I felt exasperated next to Ryan, who was furious. However, Keith said something really chilling.
But hey, I'm the one whose name is on that house.
The heated atmosphere froze instantly.
That was under the condition that you would care for Mom.
Ryan said, his voice trembling as he pressed him. With a sort of half-smile, like he was confident after playing his trump card, Keith replied.
Yeah, but circumstances change, you know? Ideal situations and reality are different.
Why do you sound so detached?
It can't be helped. Sharon says she loves that house and doesn't want to leave. Plus, I need money to get Miley into a good university.
Oh. I see, so he does have a calculated side. From the beginning, he planned to throw June out if things didn't go well. What's more, I felt like Sharon had drawn up a plan to kick her out from the start.
You are the worst.
I stated it, unleashing my contempt on Keith. With a twisted expression on his face, he gazed at me with a chilling stare.
You guys will understand once you live with her. Well, I wouldn't recommend it, so I won't force Mom on you. But I'd appreciate your help looking for an apartment and moving.
Once Keith, the mischievous brother-in-law, our home felt like a wake. The children sensed something was off with us and, for once, offered to help with the dishes and share their chocolate, making an effort in their innocent way to cheer us up. I felt a mix of guilt and comfort from their kindness, and I continued to ponder June's future. 3 days later, for the first time in his life, Ryan pleaded me. I already knew the reason. After all, we had been together as a couple for over a decade.
Michelle, I know it's a lot to ask.
Huh.
I want to bring Mom into this house.
I see.
Keith and Sharon may be terrible, but we wouldn't know what problems they're facing. Mom might have had some issues too. Still, I can't just abandon her after being thrown out like this. I will do anything I can, so.
Are you serious?
Huh?
I flashed Ryan a daring smile as he looked up at me.
You'll do anything, huh?
Yeah.
For life?
Yeah, for life.
He looked a bit flustered. The fact that he didn't just readily agree is one of the honest things I appreciate about him.
If you make a promise you're not sure you can keep, you'll be just like Keith.
You're right, I'm sorry.
Then let's only promise what you can actually do. Together with June.
I smiled at him at eye level, and Ryan scrunched his face up in gratitude and thanked me multiple times.
Michelle, thank you. Really, thank you.
I've also received a lot of help from your mother. Now it's our turn, right?
There was no guarantee that things would go smoothly. Still, I liked June enough that I couldn't just leave her behind after being kicked out. 1 month after we made our decision as a couple, Ryan and I went to pick her up.
You're quite something. You won't gain anything by sucking up to her.
Sharon whispered in my ear as she left. I knew I would never forget those words. When we arrived home, June stood anxiously at the entrance. The small figure of June looked even smaller, making me want to comfort her with sweet words. However, for a long and peaceful life together, we needed more than just momentary kindness.
June, take your time unpacking your things. Let's have some tea in the living room first. Then we'll hold a family meeting.
A family meeting?
We'll set some family rules. For us to be a family.
As I welcomed June, I decided that we needed to establish clear family rules. I wouldn't be the only one making decisions. We would discuss and decide together as a family, ensuring everyone was satisfied. Of course, we wouldn't be able to sustain this if it was all about demands, so we would only focus on the things we absolutely couldn't compromise on. I thought everyone might be hesitant, but perhaps they felt their wishes could be fulfilled, as they surprisingly seemed enthusiastic. Eileen's request was not to enter my room without permission. In exchange, she agreed to clean her own space. My request was not to eat food labeled with my name. Ryan, who had a history of eating my pudding without asking, let out a wry smile. Harry proposed to play video games for up to 10 hours a day. That proposal, soaked in his desires, was immediately rejected with the question of when he would sleep. Finally, I turned to June.
Well, I want to prepare breakfast on weekends, so we can all gather around the table.
That earnest request was unanimously approved. After establishing a few more rules, our life together as a family with June began. Even so, my heart was filled with anxiety. However, I soon realized that my worries were unfounded. It seemed that June and our household were a great match. After all, she was like a magician. When I returned home from my part-time job, I found our entire house cleaned and the laundry neatly folded. Just by helping out with the dinner preparations that June had prepped during the day, we were quickly able to enjoy a delicious meal. The pots and planters that had been filled with mysterious weeds were, before I knew it, blooming with lovely globe amaranth flowers. Her work was so elegant and vibrant. When I asked her a silly question,
Can you use magic, June?
she charmingly smiled while placing her index finger to her lips and replied,
It's a secret.
The relationships I had been most anxious about turned out to pose no problems at all. In fact, our family vibe became more peaceful than before. It seemed that listening to the kids during our rule setting was a good idea. I was able to understand what discontents my teenage daughter had, and my playful son also seemed to learn the importance of following the rules. The family meetings were held every 3 months, but if there was an unbearable frustration, we would hold an impromptu meeting to discuss it thoroughly as a family. Whenever Ryan and I ended up going too far with our words, we were thankful that June gently intervened to help. Thanks to her, our family was now better at understanding each other than before she moved in. Moreover, the rule June established, everyone has breakfast together on holidays, proved to be effective. She prepared wonderful breakfasts by making dashi stock and baking bread early in the morning. Even the children, who usually took their time to wake up on weekends, began to get up earlier because of the rules and the delicious food. Gradually, Aileen started participating in bread making, and Harry began to go for morning runs with Ryan. Eventually, we began to have breakfast together on weekdays as well, which also naturally led to more conversations with the kids. There were several other changes, but overall, living with June had been a positive experience for us. Of course, we still had to be considerate of each other and occasionally experienced confusion due to our differing values, but I felt we had enough room in our hearts to gradually work it out. I thought that the move had brought peace to both families, but it seemed that Keith's family was not faring so well. At first, Sharon was in high spirits due to the sense of freedom without June, and Keith seemed to come straight home from work without being caught in the middle of any conflicts. However, around 3 months in, things started to change. First, the costs of their daughter's tuition and commuting started to weigh more heavily on their finances than they had anticipated. Out of necessity, Sharon began working part-time. After being unemployed for 13 years while raising children, she appeared to be struggling. Their family home was rather large, with a spacious garden, which meant that cleaning took time and effort. Overwhelmed by her part-time job, Sharon couldn't keep up with the household chores, leaving both the inside and outside of the house in disarray. As the house fell into disrepair, it seemed that their daughter was also becoming increasingly troubled. It seemed that Miley, their daughter, did not want to go to private school. She had been reluctantly persuaded by Sharon to go. Still, the fact that she passed shows that she is indeed a bright child. However, enduring a 1-hour commute to a school where she had no acquaintances and being forced to study under those circumstances was quite tough for her. When her grades slipped or when she avoided studying, Sharon would scold her endlessly, and Keith, who just went along with whatever Sharon said, was no comfort. It seemed that only her grandmother, June, who would frequently check on her health and make her late-night snacks, had a kindness that Miley finally began to notice. I think she should have realized it sooner, but being a child, it's understandable. Miley has reportedly developed a strong dislike for her parents, who pushed her grandmother away, and she has been treating them harshly. Keith and his wife seem to be struggling a lot with her behavior.
So, could you give us Mom back?
I was taken aback at Keith's straightforward request, as he relayed the disastrous situation at their home and Sharon's unreasonable demands like a messenger pigeon. What does he mean by so? I was beyond angry, just left in disbelief. Ryan looked expressionless. I probably had the same look on my face.
But we're in trouble here. If this continues, my wife won't be able to keep her part-time job, and we won't be able to pay for school fees.
You took the houses from Mom for that very reason, didn't you? Why don't you do the housework?
No, I'm busy.
So you're working that hard, and yet you're in such a tight spot that you can't even pay the rent? Just how low is your salary?
Indeed, it was curious. Despite leaving the household to work, he always seemed to be complaining about money. I couldn't help but recall the image of Sharon, who spent money on brand-name handbags and beauty treatments. It seemed Keith was trying to buy his way to her affection. So foolish. Since we were making a ruckus at the entrance, June poked her head out from the living room. Though I had told her it was fine to stay hidden, it was only natural that she became concerned, as this was about her.
Keith, what is going on with you?
Her expression was, of course, just as stoic and unreadable. Still, Keith greeted her cheerfully.
Mom, you heard what we were talking about, right? You want to go back to Dad's house, don't you? Sharon says she's reflecting on her actions, so please forgive her.
Where is she?
As a daughter-in-law, Sharon had no intention of apologizing, but I suppose she wanted a conveniently available servant. How self-centered and reliant on others can this couple be?
I will not go back. And of course, I won't lend you any money.
It was a shock for Keith to see Jane's cold look. He was used to her being all sweet and caring. I was surprised by how naive he was to think she would give a good response to his request.
But don't you feel sorry for Miley? She's been lonely since you left, and her smiles have decreased. At this rate, she might even have to drop out of the school she worked so hard to get into.
That is for you two as her parents to address. The reason for her situation lies in your shallow actions that didn't consider her feelings.
But
First of all, using your child as a hostage for a negotiation is absolutely despicable.
It seemed that Keith was starting to realize the harsh truth. It was not that they had cast aside June, rather, she had been the one to abandon them.
Go home. Neither Miley nor I are tools for your convenience.
Keith left, looking as though his spirit had been drained, after being firmly rejected by the mother whom he thought was kind. As I returned to the living room to praise June for her bravery, the three children looked up at me with anxiety. Aileen and Harry, along with Miley, were all present.
I'm sorry, Grandma, about what Dad and Mom said.
Miley looked like she was on the verge of tears, and it broke my heart. June lovingly held her hand and smiled gently.
It's not your fault, Miley. Besides, you apologized to Grandma properly, didn't you? Now, let's continue with the gardening.
As Aileen stroked Miley's back, they resumed handling the green plants. In fact, a few months prior, Miley took a train by herself just to come to our house and apologize to June. Despite trembling in her voice and legs, she expressed her sincerity in her words, and it was truly commendable. She was far more mature than her parents. Of course, June accepted her apology, and Miley had since begun visiting our home occasionally to help her. Thus, she would not become a mere pawn in the dirty game of adult negotiations. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as I mentally scoffed at their foolishness. I still had a long way to go to be as graceful as June. Fast forward 10 years. Aileen is now enjoying her life as a working adult, while Harry is thriving as a university student. They may not be earning high salaries or attending prestigious universities, but both of them have chosen their paths and are diligently working towards their goals, which makes me proud as a parent. Miley managed to progress internally through her school until high school, but she defied her parents' strong opposition and chose vocational school instead of university. It seemed that during her time spent with June, she had discovered what she truly wanted to pursue. She supplemented her tuition through part-time work and scholarships and landed a job with a company that was quite a distance away by plane after graduation. Although Miley shouldn't have incurred any schooling expenses after high school, it appeared that Keith and Sharon were struggling financially. It seemed that the stress of their daughter not turning out as they had wished greatly affected Sharon. She would indulge in shopping to relieve her stress yet neglect the cleaning. The house, once tidy when June lived there, had now overflowed with items to the point where it was avoided by the neighborhood. Despite their repeating behavior, they would regularly lean on June and our family, but we never welcomed them back. In fact, Sharon had never made an appearance. It was always Keith who came as a messenger. Since they had sown the seeds of their own consequences, they could only harvest what they had planted. In the quiet home left by the children, June and I enjoy a pleasant life together, maintaining just the right distance from each other. It seems Ryan is not able to look down on me either, as he cherishes me even now, 25 years into our marriage. From the outside, it may seem like an ordinary life, but with everyone in the family thriving, I am incredibly happy.